Alrighty, so first of all, I hope everybody had a great Christmas, and as it is the case for everybody, even for the people in the MLS world, I decided to take a Christmas break and I didn't record a video in the last couple of days. But now that Christmas is over, well, unless if you're in Canada, happy Boxing Day to you all. It's time to go back making some video and go back to the moving forward series where we talk about the San Jose Earthquakes. So this is the second team that I'm gonna talk about that got eliminated in the playing round, and then after that we'll start getting talk about teams that got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. And also in the upcoming days I'll make my annual video talk about some of the things that I saw in 2023, and then most importantly make our bold prediction of what's going to happen in MLS in 2024. But that being said, in terms of looking at the San Jose Earthquakes this season, again, I do think that the Quakes still had a successful season. I know there are some Quakes fans that are very critical of this team and say that, it doesn't seem like a lot has changed in terms of this year. I do think that it's still considered to be a successful season, mainly because they made it to the playoffs. I did not expect this team to make it to the playoffs. I mean, I know when you look at the roster, they definitely could be a team that can sneak into the playoffs, but that was not what I envisioned. I mean, what I envisioned in the beginning of the season after they finished dead last in the West is the fact that there's going to be improvements and that this team will definitely be more watchable, and especially the defense will be a little bit more solidified this season under Luchi Gonzalez, which, depending on how you look at it, and as we'll get to, it kind of did and it kind of didn't. But the fact that Luchi Gonzalez was able to implement his system and guide this team to the playoffs in his first year, yeah, there that feel like alone is considered a success. Now, I will also say that I'm not gonna say that everything went perfectly right. I'm not gonna put those rose tinted glasses and say that, well, the Quakes overachieved by a ton this season, and that obviously I'll also mention how it feels like this team is now back into the conundrum that they found themselves in 2018 and 2021, and those were the years coming into the season where they were fresh off of just making the playoffs, and then they didn't make any progress after that. Now, in terms of this season itself, they finished with a 10-14-10 record and finished with 44 points. They scored 39 goals this season, which was not a lot. I mean, this was actually one of the worst goal scoring team in the Western Conference. In fact, only the Colorado Rapids score fewer goals than the Quakes this season. Goal scoring was definitely a problem for this team this year. But they only allowed 43 goals this season, which is definitely fewer than what we saw last season. I mean, last season I think they shipped like 60 plus goal, and this is where of course we'll get to talk about how in some way the defense was kind of fixed under Luchi Gonzalez, and it kind of didn't as well. But either way, they finished with a goal differential of -4, and they finished ninth in the Western Conference, but they were once again eliminated by Sporting KC in the playing round, and pretty much it's like deja vu of what we saw in the 2020 COVID shortened season where the Quakes and Sporting KC face off against each other. That game went to a PK shootout, and this one also went to a PK shootout, and Tim Melia got the best of the Quakes. Although I will say that at least this time, the Quakes were able to score goals past Tim Melia from the PK shootout, whereas in the 2020 version, yeah, let's not talk about that. In terms of head coach, it's Luchi Gonzalez. He's been in helm since 2023, and the chief soccer officer is Chris Leach. He's been here since 2022. And in terms of the top goal scored for the Quakes, well, despite the fact they didn't score a lot of goals this season, there were two players that was carrying the weight in terms of the goal scoring. And that player is Christian Espinoza, scoring 13 goals this season, followed by Jeremy Abosi, who I thought he had a down year this season. But despite him having a down season, still able to tally a double-digit goal with 10 goals this season. Then you got Miguel Triaco with 3 goals, Carlos Capo with 2 goals, and Matthew Hoppy with 2 goals. So again, these are getting to a point where you start to see a bunch of players getting goals, and that besides Ibosi and Espinoza, there really wasn't like a goal scoring threat for this Quakes team at all this season. Now, in terms of the top assist leader, unsurprisingly, it's Christian Espinoza with 13 assists this season. But then you got Jameer Montero and Jackson Yule with 5 assists, Carlos Capo with 4 assists, and Jeremy Ibosi rounds up the top five with 4 assists as well. Now, looking at the last 5 seasons for the Quakes, yeah, it's been pretty mediocre to worse for the Quakes. I mean, last season was actually their best season in terms of points tally since 2019 when they were able to Um, Finished with 10, 14, and 10 record and finished with 44 points, which is good for ninth. In 2022, they finished dead last. It was 8, 11, and 15 was the record, and they finished with 35 points. And then in 2021, they finished in 10th place, 10, 11, and 13, and finished with 41 points. Keep in mind, during the era of 2019 all the way to 2022, that was the Mateus Almeida era. And if you know about the Mateus Almeida era, those were some of the craziest year that I think any Quakes fan has experience of the team, and probably the craziest we have seen an MLS team going through. Where with Mateus Almeida and the fact that he loves his man marking system, it creates some really roller coaster kind of event, and really make the Quakes probably some of the most watchable team in MLS for the past couple of years. But unfortunately, this is a league that's not about watchability contest. This is a league about picking up points, and unfortunately, that's kind of the thing that I've mentioned many times before. I'm pretty sure Quakes fans also mentioned it many times before, where it doesn't matter how watchable they have, it doesn't matter how entertaining they can be to neutral. They're not getting the result. It's not good enough. But in 2021, they finished in 10th place with 10, 11, 13 record and finished with 41 points. In the COVID shortened season, they finished with 8th place with an 8, 6, and 9 record and finished with 30 points. And then in 2019, they finished in 8th place with a 13, 5, and 16 record and finished with 44 points. And despite the fact that they finished the same points total as they did in 2023. The difference in 2019 is that they did not have that extended playoff spot like what we saw in 2020 and 2023, where the Quakes basically took advantage of that extended playoff spot and slotted as the last team in the Western Conference. Now, in terms of average attendance, 18,412, but I put an asterisk in terms of it because the reason why I put an asterisk is that attendance does include games that's at Stanford Stadium and also at Levi Stadium. And this season, the Cali Classico at Stanford wasn't actually sold out. It was actually like there was still a fair amount of people. It was still 40,000 plus, but it wasn't sold out as what we have seen in the past year or so. Which again is a little bit surprising that that is the case, but I guess maybe it could be due to the fact that there wasn't really some big name kind of players that we've seen in the past Cali Classico as what we saw this year. So maybe that's why we didn't get as much or at least a sold out attendance as we would see a Cali Classico has for the past couple of years. But the game at Levi Stadium against LAFC, that was the Cinco de Mayo game. That game did sold out. It was 45,000 plus, and that game is going to be returning this season. And there's no doubt that I won't be surprised there's going to be a good attendance in that, because these LA games, that it's big for us Quakes fans in terms of beating these LA teams. So it's not a big surprise we see some big attendance for these games, which is why I can't wait until we do see the Cali Classico in the season opener for the Quakes. I mean, they mentioned this is the first time the Quakes actually have their season home opener against the LA Galaxy in a Cali Classico. I expect that game to be sold out. But in terms of games at PayPal Park, like if you don't include the two special game at Levi Stadium in Stanford, I will say that the attendance has been better this season, and I think that shouldn't come as a surprise when this team started to perform better, that the attendance goes up. I mean, the attendance was bad in 2022, mainly because after Mateus Almeida was fired, the team didn't really kind of had that fun kind of style that we seen under Alex Cavallo. And also, when you have a team that is like near the bottom of the standings, nobody is going to show up to games. But yeah, attendance has been better. I wouldn't say it has been as good as what we saw maybe back in 2017 and 2016, but a lot of that has to do with the new stadium luster. I mean, the new stadium luster has clearly weared off for the Quakes, but still, this season I think they were, if you don't include the game at Stanford and Levi's, I think they were averaging like around 16,000 or so at PayPal Park, which is pretty good considering the previous season they were only averaging like 13,000 and 12,000, and they were among the some of the worst attended team in the league. And again, that's not because of the fact that Quakes fans are not loyal. It's mainly because the team was terrible, and you also had that owner guy called John Fisher that still is the owner of the Quakes, and still a lot of Quakes fans are staying away from games because they're unhappy that he's still in charge, and they probably won't attend games until he decided to either step down or potentially get removed as the owners of the Quakes, which I don't think that's gonna happen. But in terms of MVP this season, it's gotta be Christian Espinoza. I mean, I don't really need to explain why Christian Espinoza is the MVP. He literally carried this team this season, both on the goal scoring and assist department. And in terms of disappointment, there were definitely some notable names that I could have gone with disappointment. One name that I will say is kind of a shout out. Well, in a disappointment case, it's probably not a shout out, but kind of a dishonorable mention is Jonathan Mensah. Really disappointing season for Jonathan Mensah. I mean, when the Quakes picked him up, I know that he definitely lost his luster a little bit during the end of his time with Columbus, but I didn't think that he would just fall off the cliff like he did this season to a point where he basically fell out of the lineup and got benched multiple times because of how poor that he played. But obviously, the biggest disappointment you got to say for the Quakes has to be K Cal. And honestly, what is so disappointing about this is that after what we saw during his time in the U20 World Cup and how well he performed, and even with the national team that is, we thought that he can translate that into MLS play too, but nope. Instead, it was a very disappointing season for him. I think he only scored like one goal this season. And then there's also the time when I think Bologna was trying to get Cal from the Quakes, and I was really surprised that they decided not to sell him there. I mean, I get that maybe the Quakes were hoping that they can get a higher value and higher selling price for K Cal, but consider how he's been this season and how underwhelming it is, and the money that Bologna was trying to get K Cal for, I thought they could have just easily again and cut their losses a say, but instead he's still on this team, and again, let's just hope that he can have a bounce back season because again, is he going to be another latest San Jose Earthquakes player that as soon as he tastes success in the national team, things started to kind of fall apart. I mean, we always see this with Quakes player when they are with the national team, they just never really translate that well into MLS play, and let's just hope K Cal is not that latest victim to potentially fall on that list. And then the young player to watch for the Quakes, I'm gonna go with Nico Chakeris. I mean, there's a lot of great young players to watch for this Quakes team because this Quakes team is solely heavily focused on the academy, and I've mentioned before, and even have even mentioned that the Quakes have probably one of the most underrated academy, and an academy that is definitely upcoming to become one of the best academy in MLS. Heck, they made a documentary about this in Bleacher Report just in the beginning of the season of how great this academy is, and it's just gonna get better as the year goes on, especially with that new training facility they're gonna be opening soon. But it's gonna be Nico Jaqueras. I think he definitely showed some improvement this season. I think he's gonna continue to improve as well. Also, shout out to Cruz Medina as another player that is a young player to watch. So because I of course follow this team carefully, I do know more about some of the young players that this team has had, and Cruz Medina is definitely one of the names out of a long list of names in the Quakes Academy that I would say that he could definitely break into the first team and could be a star in MLS. I mean, he's already shown it in the U17 level with the national team. I won't be surprised once he does get promoted in the starting spot, which could be as soon as this season. I mean, knowing Luchi Gonzalez love to play young players, I won't be surprised. Cruz Medina could be promoted into the starting 11 or into the senior team as soon as this season and get some valuable minutes. But yeah, these two guys are definitely guys that I think the Quakes in terms of young player to watch is to look out for next season, and also maybe some more notable name because these two players are not the only players that I mentioned that the Quakes are producing some really good players out of their academy that can easily make an impact to this team. So what went right for this Quakes team? Well, like I said, they made it to the playoffs, which again I know some people would say playing round doesn't count as the playoffs. I'll count it because we the way that the playoff structure begin, it always start in the wild card round between the 8th and 9th seed. So I count that as a playoffs. Which again, if I said in the beginning of the season, if they make it to the playoffs, it's considered a success. They made it to the playoffs, so therefore they did it is considered a successful season. Christian Espinoza basically had a Wando-esque carry job season, and I would say that he's probably did even better than what Wando did. So for many years, Wando has been really just carrying this team in terms of goal scoring until he ultimately retired just a couple of seasons ago, and it feels like Christian Espinoza basically followed that footstep and then some by not only being the guy at times like the only goal scorer of this team. I mean, there were times with where in the 2023 season where he was the only goal scorer for this team. That's how much he was carrying the weight of this team, and also creating those assists, which is again for a guy that plays on the wing, you don't expect a guy play on the wing creating as much assists as what we see. But one of the trademark of Christian Espinoza and one of the trademark of the Quakes is that they love to get into the flank and cross the ball into the box. And I would say Christian Espinoza is probably one of the best player to do so in the past couple of season. And then last thing that went right, it's got to be the goalkeeping spot and Daniel. And this is definitely kind of came out of nowhere. Consider the fact that I remember when Daniel started the first couple of games for the Quakes in the beginning of the season, he looked shaky at best, and I even mentioned that how he better not reminds me of a certain guy that also go by that name, but his last name is Vega. But of course, he did get injured, and then JT Marcikowski replaced him while he was on the injury list. JT Marcikowski obviously didn't had a great season, so he once Daniel was healthy again, he basically got the number one spot back. And he never looked back ever since that, because he basically solidified himself as a bona fide top tier MLS goalkeeper that the Quakes have not had since years. I even mentioned that I have not seen a Quakes goalkeeper being this good since probably Daniel, or not Daniel, but David Bingham left this team back in 2017. I mean, there were times where he was single handedly keeping the Quakes uh, uh, keeping the Quakes in games and even stealing points on the road. I will never forget that game against Vancouver where he literally single-handedly stole 3 points for the Quakes with the way that he was just standing on his heads in that game. And he also makes some big penalty kick save as well. So he's not only just a good shot stopper, he's also a guy that can be good in terms of saving penalties. And that again, this is a guy that from the beginning of the season when he was looking shaky, I would never had imagined that he would become a top tier goalkeeper and a guy that I feel like if you want to talk about one of the most underrated goalkeeper in the league, and I know there's a lot of underrated goalkeeper in my opinion that are is overshadowed by some of the more well known goalkeepers in this league. Daniel is definitely going to be right up that list. I don't think he's getting appreciated with the amount of saves and the amount of times he just single-handedly bailed out this defense. That this is where I'll talk about how the defense at times this season was good, but then at this time the only reason why they didn't concede more goals than the 43 that they had this year was because Daniel was just standing on his heads time and time again. And then what went wrong for this team? Well, the attack regressed badly, and I think this is not a big surprise because one of the biggest criticism of Lucci Ball is the fact that he it doesn't really generate too much attacking threat. It's more of a defensive approach. I mean, we saw this during his time with Dallas, and I'm pretty sure FC Dallas fan can chime in the fact that this what we've seen with Luchi Gonzalez at the San Jose Earthquakes is the same problem that he has with FC Dallas, where at times it gets a little bit too predictable on the attack. It gets a little bit too stagnated, and that's kind of what we saw this season. I mean, there were times where this season the attack just looked really stale at time, and part of that has to do with that they don't have really a playmaker to run the system. And I would also argue that the 39 goals that they've scored, that is still kind of considered high, considering they at times this season the Quakes were scoring golazo after week. I mean, I think Miguel Triaco himself had at least two or three golazo this season, so that this attack could have been even worse than the 39 goals that they score, and that's something that was very disappointing to see, and that this is also where Quakes fans are not going to be happy seeing this because they remember this is kind of the life that they had to live under when Dominic Kinnear was still the coach of this team. And man, you do not want to mention Dominic Kinnear name in the Quakes fan base because yeah, those days were not fun when he was coaching this team, and especially with the style that this Quakes team has played every single game. The disappointment draw against Austin, which voided the Quakes the first home opener game at PayPal Park. So despite the fact that that game did clinch the playoff spot for the Quakes, it's still considered to be a disappointment because Austin was just they're dead and buried. Like this team was already thinking about the off season, and I'm pretty sure the players are already thinking about vacation mode. The fact that they didn't get a win out of that game, especially at home, which was something that they were very good at this season. It seems like PayPal Park has that fortress kind of attitude as what we've seen for in past season. But the fact that in their final game, and especially in front of a sold out crowd, that was probably the loudest and the most energetic I've seen a PayPal Park crowd in a very long time. The fact that they only got a draw out of that game and didn't get a chance to host a home game in the playoffs is a huge disappointment. But what's even more disappointing is that we're now in the year of 2023, and PayPal Park has been existing for 8 years now, and it has still not hosted a playoff game. I think that is probably the longest drought of any team to not have a home playoff game of their brand new stadium, and it's sad to see because I really am hoping eventually there's going to be that one day where PayPal Park is gonna host a playoff game, and if they are gonna host a playoff game, it's gonna be similar to the atmosphere that I've saw between the Quakes and Austin, and maybe even better because that atmosphere was probably the best I've seen at any Quakes game in a very long time. Probably even better than what we've seen in some of those Cali Classico, and those Cali Classico games are special too. But yeah, very disappointing to see how they got a draw out of that game, and even if they made it to the playoffs, they would have had a home playoff game if they would have won that game. And then of course the road record still sucks. I mean that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean this team always sucks on the road, so yeah, that's nothing new. I don't even know why I wrote that. I think I just wrote that just because of the default to just kind of explain for probably the fifth season in a row or the fifth time when I'm doing a season overview of the Quakes. That yeah, just a reminder that the Quakes still suck on the road. So moving forward, how's this team gonna look? It feels like we're back in the 2018 and 2021 conundrum, and I said this in the beginning of this video because I feel like we're back into where we were in 2018 and 2021, where they're fresh off of a decent season where they were able to make it to the playoffs. What are they going to be able to build on it heading into next season? And for what we saw in 2018 and 2021, the answer is no. And in the case of 2018, it was a huge no. I mean, it ended up to be the worst season that the Quakes has ever had in their franchise history, and I'm hoping that we don't have a repeat of that heading into 2024. And a way for them to kind of improve their season is continue to develop the good young talent that they have. Like I said, this team has some really good young talent to play out of the academy. I'm pretty sure Luchi Gonzalez is going to continue to promote them because he's a huge believer in terms of giving young players chance. That's kind of the reason why Quakes bought him into this team in the first place, and I won't be surprised. We'll see more of that and maybe some breakout start coming out of the Quakes Academy. They need a playmaking number 10. I mean, again, this team, the fact that they just don't really have a playmaker besides Christian Espinoza, and I don't think he should be the main playmaker of this team because the playmaker of the team, and especially with the system that Lucha Gonzalez set up, it needs to have a number 10 to be that playmaker that can get the team going on the attack, and that's something that they desperately needed, which again, I'm really hoping that that's the case, but knowing past season, maybe that might not be the Quake case because the Quakes have always been very cheap in terms of some of their signing. And then lastly, they still need to improve the back line. So again, like I said, even though they conceded 43 goals, which was a significant improvement compared to last season, it was really overshadowed because of Daniel single-handedly bailed them out. Because if he didn't bail them out single-handedly at times, this team could have easily conceded 50 plus goals or even 60 plus goals. Once again, I mean, the back line is still a big problem for this team. I mean, even once they do get Nathan back into this team heading into next season, I still think that they need some improvement. Especially they still need to replace Jonathan Mensah that they decided to not renew him this season, and rightfully so because he kind of fell off on a cliff in terms of his performance as the season goes along. So yeah, that's going to be something that the Quakes are going to need heading into next season. And again, this is going to be interesting. 2024 season. I'm really hoping that this 2024 season is not going to be a repeat of what we see in 2018 and 2021. I mean, for me, as a best minute Quakes fan, I feel like it could be considering there hasn't really been a lot of signing that this team has made, and that's been one of the criticism I've always said about the Quakes being cheap, and a lot of that has to do with the ownership ship room and why this is why Quakes fans to this day still are protesting, demanding John Fisher to sell the team. But that being said, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this moving forward series episode. And if you're a Quakes fan like myself, what do you think went right, went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But till then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.